All right. I think we are live now, which is very exciting. Wonderful. Well, we are going to give just a couple of moments to let some people log in and join us before I introduce our very special guest today. And I would invite, if you are logging on and you can hear us, see us, everything is good, drop a comment in the box so that we know we're not just talking to ourselves, although I'm sure between Dr. Stewart and I, that would be fine. We could have plenty to talk about, but comment, let us know maybe where you're viewing from, what brought you to this webinar, to this Facebook Live today, what your interest in the field is, and we'll be on the lookout for some of those. And as soon as we see those start rolling in, we'll know that we can get started. Perfect. Thank you, Susan, who says that she can see us just fine, and Amber, who says, hi, Leslie, all is good. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Um, well, wonderful. We'll get right started. I could not be more excited about this conversation today, not just because we have with us a brilliant leader in this field, but also because Dr. Stewart and I go way back. When I was a master's student at Georgia State University studying mental health counseling, Dr. Stewart was a doc student, and she was a leader for me. She's a leader for the field. She helped me in ways that we could fill a whole hour talking about just in general. So I'm very excited to have you all today joining us. I see we have more people saying hello. Tracy from Richmond. We have Stephanie from Austin, Chris in Florida. So we have a lot of different people from all over the world joining us. Dr. Stewart.
Wonderful. That's exciting. Hi,
Yeah,
everybody.
that is exciting. Awesome. So, what we'll do today is I have some questions prepared that I will ask Dr. Stewart, and then we will be opening up to some questions. So, put them in your chat box if you think of something. At the end, we'll see what questions we have time to answer, and we want this to be really conversational. So, if anything piques your interest, feel free to throw it out there, and we will try to get to it. But like I said, it's such an honor to be here today with Dr. Leslie Stewart. She is an associate professor of counseling at Idaho State University. She researches AAI in counseling and supervision, crisis response, and trauma-informed counseling preparation. So her expertise has really helped us at Pet Partners with a lot of things, such as our AACR program. She also directs the certificate program in AAI at Idaho State, which is a program you'll hear a little bit more about later in our conversation. Dr. Stewart has done so much to champion this work that we are also passionate about. She is a friend of Pet Partners for sure. She has been a handler with us, and she also serves on our Human Animal Bond Advisory Board. She authors publications, offers presentations, and even has authored the American Counseling Association Competencies for Animal Assisted Therapy and Counseling. So we made a pretty lengthy introduction so far, and believe it or not, it doesn't even cover all of the things that she does for our field, but I want to let some of the conversation take us there so that you can learn more about her work and about her hopes for the field in the future. So welcome, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you for the super kind introduction. It is always meaningful when we get to do these things together with our history. And I remember first meeting you as a master's student and thinking like, wow, she's going to go places.
Aw.
Really neat to
Well,
see where you are.
thank you. Yes, we are very fortunate to have ended up at the same school and to have had this shared passion. It's funny, we often, the two of us, talk about looking back and seeing where we were and seeing just in a short amount of time how far the field has come in general. So, only exciting things ahead. So, I want to start out today and see if you could just kind of talk us through how you got started in this field and how you knew that this was a career path that you wanted to take. I think for a lot of people, there's obviously this goal of having therapy animals in practice, but how did you know that this is something that you not only wanted to do, but to become a leader
Well, the short answer is I didn't.
in?
when I think when I was early career development, getting my undergraduate degree and deciding what is it that I want to do for work for the rest of my life, I didn't even know this was a thing.
Mhm.
So I have grown up writing, showing, and training hunter jumpers on the national show circuit. And I taught writing lessons for students who wanted to learn those types of things. And that's really where I got my start is several hours a day, 5 days a week at the barn on a horse. And um, I don't know, it never occurred to me that it wasn't common knowledge
Mm-hmm.
that these relationships with these animals were so significant and that they defined part of my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on it now, I feel like I could almost write something called "Everything I Learned About Counseling I Learned from a Horse."
Yeah. You should write that.
Oh my gosh, we'll talk about that later. Um, but yeah, I took for granted. I think I thought, well, everyone must know this. I'd kind of grown up knowing it,
Mm-hmm.
and I sort of explored some. Had a long undergraduate path exploring. Well, I think I want to do this. No, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
fit. And what is someone who grew up with horses and riding and training and show? What do they do with their lives?
Right.
No, going to business school just doesn't fit.
Yep.
So I explored a lot of options and found myself really drawn to the psych classes, like many folks in the helping professions are,
Mm-hmm.
and decided, okay, I'd like to learn more about this. I'd like to major in this and see where that goes. And I was fortunate enough to have shared barn space with a professional who she's a psychologist that did equine assisted therapy through
Mm-hmm.
PATH, the Professional
Okay.
Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship. It was NARA at the time. Um, but she ran groups out at the barn for the Department of Juvenile Justice. And there were a couple of other therapists on staff that saw individual clients. And she found out I was interested in psych, and she said, "Well, would you like an internship?" And I said, "There is one." And she said,
Wow.
"Well,
Yeah.
sure." So I think I have a lot to thank her for
Mm-hmm.
in just getting me introduced to the more formalized approach of horses and people helping each other.
Right.
Um, and I loved it so much. It was like, this is my thing. This is my career. Um, And so I went forward and obtained my own PATH certification. And I taught adaptive writing lessons for kids that had a variety of different ability related needs and
Mm-hmm.
different physical needs. And um, I can't even tell you what a great job that was. So sometimes their providers would send me things that they were working on in, their school counseling or their physical therapy or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I would get the opportunity to work that into a writing lesson, like something related. And so it was this creative process where um, just I got to figure out the physical needs and how we could make adaptations to the writing process that accommodated the student's needs as well as the horse's comfort. And then designing those elements into every writing lesson to help support what the student was working on. It's just the dream come true. Um,
Yeah. I bet. To be able to see that too, it's so, so many people who are watching today and so many people who are in this field, you have a love for animals, of course, but there's also it's not just that you want to work with animals, it's that you want to see what the human animal bond can do for us as humans. So I imagine to have had those experiences so early on in your career really kind of solidified a lot for you moving forward, into this work.
and it was, well, obviously I loved being around my animals. And when I was having a bad day, they provided quite a bit of comfort. But it was never about what they can give me for comfort.
Right.
I think, growing up doing that type of writing, I always viewed them as my teachers.
Mm. Hmm.
And so I think that translated, and that idea that this animal isn't just here to provide me comfort on demand. I'm not here to use them in that way.
Hmm.
That they have a lot to teach me about the sport, about my skills, but also about myself as a person and myself in relationships.
Right.
And I think that's something that, in addition to the writing skills, that was really enjoyable in the adaptive writing lessons. And I think I probably could have been happy doing that for quite a long time. And then I noticed that as I built a rapport with my clients and their families, that oftentimes sort of before the lesson, when I'd have the parent come in and catch me up on what had been going well that week or any challenges that had been going on that week that I should be aware of, the parents would sit down and start to talk about mental health related things, like experiencing symptoms of depression and even occasionally suicidal ideation. And I realized, like, this is part of the job, and I'm grossly under equipped to respond to that in any kind of helpful way. So I realized I needed a degree in counseling. And so
Well,
that's what I set out to do,
yeah.
with every intention that it would just be right back to the farm. And I realized in my master's program really quickly that this idea that animals were really important teachers and very valid in that was at best news to many folks, and at worst completely discounted and ridiculed.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that stood in the way was, a lack of professionalization, a lack of quality empirical research, and a lack of sort of guiding principles about, how do we do this work well?
Right.
And so I thought, well, and I shoot, and it was an uphill battle in my master's program, and that's okay because I learned a lot. I realized, well, shoot, I guess in order to fix the problem, I've got to contribute. I got to do some research. Like, that's, oh man, I guess I have to go get a PhD.
I can relate. Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did and how I ended up at Georgia State. And I was so lucky at Georgia State. Nobody had any idea what in the world I was talking about, but they believed me.
Right.
And they said, if that's the thing, let's go get it. And I don't know anything about your topic, but what I do know is how to research well. And my mentors really taught me how to become a scholar, and supported me even though they had no idea what it was I was talking about. So it's kind of how I got here. And then along the way with, internships and my experiences as a professional, integrating, I discovered it's pretty hard to take a horse in an elevator. So
Yes.
started expanding to working with dogs as well as rabbits.
That is it's a good testimony to hear because I think, for a lot of us who are having these goals of bringing therapy animals in, whether it be for professionalized work or even in our volunteer capacities, we all want to be taken more seriously. We all know how powerful this intervention can be. And so there really is something, no matter where you are in life, that you can do to be an advocate for the continued development of this intervention. So I'm happy to hear, that this was something that built up over time for you. And even you said it was a process full of struggles. I know it is for a lot of us. And so to see where you are today and to know that that's where you came from, at least for me, is very inspiring.
Yeah, I sort of stumbled my way into it. I tried a lot of other career fields, but apparently the universe didn't think that was a great idea because I kept, no matter how hard I tried to do something else, I kept landing right here.
Thank goodness for that. I'm very thankful that the universe did not let you settle into any of
I'm
those
pretty
other.
happy in my career. So
Good. Awesome. Well, when we started the call, we talked some about, or I mentioned how you were a member of the Pet Partners family and how you contribute in so many different ways to our Human Animal Bond Advisory Board as subject matter expert on various projects, to written publications, to presentations at the conference. So say more for all of our viewers, many of which are from the Pet Partners family, how you became involved with this organization.
So, before I even got into mental health, I was involved with horses.
Right.
And before I even applied to the master's program, I was working as the PATH instructor. And PATH does a really great job of preparing their instructors to facilitate those interactions while advocating for the animal and doing it well. But turns out they're equine specific. So I didn't know anything. I mean, I had known a lot of things about animal training from the horses, and a lot of it bled over into dogs. But I didn't know anything about, what do I need to do this well with a dog, much less a bunny rabbit.
Right.
And so in looking for support resources, of course, pet partners came to the top. That not especially with your focus on multiple species, which I think is really powerful. Um, and so I started as a pet partners fan and admirer, and seeking registration with Sophie, the white German Shepherd that originally partnered with me as a canine. And we went through the registration process, and we sort of stumbled through it together. I think it ended up okay, but both of us were definitely still learning, and just having this like admiration for pet partners, and wow, this is such an amazing organization, and a little starstruck sometimes. And then a good friend of mine, Amy Johnson at Oakland University, who teaches a fabulous online curriculum in AAIs as well, um, started doing a professional summit um, for the advisory board for their program. And so I was lucky enough to get invited to that. And that's where I met Mary Margaret, um, who has a little something to do with pet partners.
Yes. Yes.
And all of us were sharing some of our work and what we'd been doing in the field, and sort of met Mary Margaret that way, and we got to talking about, well, gosh, I think maybe some of this work um, might have a home in pet partners.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's how I got involved, more than just being a pet partners registered team, being involved on the more professional side of things. And, from that point, did some um, started out with the white paper, and helping with some presentations and resources. And then eventually I nearly dropped dead when I got the invitation to serve on the Human Animal Bond Advisory Board. It was like I just could. I was going to call my partner and tell him, and I just couldn't with the word. I was like, and the thing, and it happened, and I'm so excited.
That is so awesome. And it's true when you start to use anyone can relate to you start to research your therapy animal organization, you start to look at pet partners, and when you very first make that contact, you imagine yourself taking the evaluation and it's intimidating and it's scary. And then you pass the evaluation and it's this huge accomplishment. And maybe you take a volunteer leadership role, you become an advisory board member, or you're very lucky like me and become on staff. And at each point along the way, it just is a you have to kind of make sure that it's real life. It feels too good to be true.
And really, the level of professionalism and the quality of resources that Pet Partners offers is really second to none. I can't imagine being involved with a different organization. And y'all treat your folks really nicely. And so, in a lot of ways, you all at Pet Partners have been responsible for quite a bit of my professional growth too.
Oh, well, thank you. That is good to hear. And it's certainly a mutually beneficial relationship. But we even think back to responding to this COVID crisis at the beginning of the year. One of the first people who we reached out to was Dr. Leslie Stewart, who has specialty in crisis and trauma response, knowing that we were in the midst of a global crisis. And to be able to have that expertise, it's not just about the animal side of the leash, if you will, but also about the very important and essential human end of things, really prepares all of us to do our work in a better way. You mentioned that one of the things that brought you to Pet Partners was that there is inclusion in a lot of different species. And I know that you have a lot of different species represented in your work. So I just wanted to see if you could talk to us a little bit about the different species that you've worked with, how you've decided to incorporate them differently, and what you think they bring to the table in a different way.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I know equines are one of the 9 species that Pet Partners will evaluate for registration. And so horses is obviously it's where I got my start, although I wasn't aware of Pet Partners at that time. So we were working through PATH, so that was a different organization. But and that's where I think I'm at home the most. I've
Mhm.
grown up around them. I've worked with them. They were 99% of who I was for a very long time. And so horses are, I think I'm not fully me unless I'm in relation to a horse. And so that's where I got my start. And I'm pretty comfortable working with horses, both with mounted work
Mm-hmm.
as well as ground work. Um, and so that's, if I could fit the horses on an elevator and bring them up to my lovely office here, I would.
Yes, I knew you would.
Yeah, and so I've always loved other animals, but it was almost out of like, okay, well, I can't bring the barn everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So how about I learn what it takes to work with other species? And of course, I've always had dogs too, and they've been very important to me. I think I knew dogs at that point more like a dedicated dog owner and less
Mm-hmm.
like an animal assisted interventionist. I know at that point in my career, I sure knew horses like an animal assisted interventionist, but I really had to work on developing that competence with dogs, even though I'd had them and loved them my whole life. Um, and the other animal that I happened to have as an accidental pet at that point was a rabbit, and she's now retired. But looking into that's Saki. She is the bunny who is younger than Killer, the original retired rabbit. But Saki comes with me on a regular basis. Um, and I think in order to care for the bunny, because I had no idea when I accidentally ended up with a bunny how to even take care of them, um, I ended up doing quite a bit of research into what you might need to know to work with a bunny. Um, and it just seemed kind of like, well, these are the animals that I'm able to connect with and able to understand well enough to work with, and that are integrated into my lifestyle. We already have a really strong bond. Um, and so I originally started out just sessions here and there every once in a while with the rabbit. So she's non-intimidating
Yeah.
for the most part. Um, she's relatively calm.
Mm-hmm.
So she's just real. So both of the rabbits I have are just laid back animals. So really tolerant of me not knowing what I'm doing. I felt like with the rabbits, as long as I could keep all of us safe and happy,
Mm-hmm.
that was a good start.
Mm-hmm.
That I didn't necessarily have to be good at this yet, as long as I could keep everyone safe and happy. And I felt like I could do that pretty well with the rabbits.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the rabbits turned out to be a lot more like horses than I thought. Their behavior, their social structures, and their physiology and care, they're almost like little miniature, funny looking horses. More so than they are like dogs and cats, which I think a lot of people assume that they are. So a lot of my knowledge of horses was able to be adapted with a rabbit, and it was a really natural fit because I was so used to working with horses.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Wow.
and it turns out, like horses, if you don't speak rabbit, rabbit communication is very subtle,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not quite as overt and obvious as it is sometimes with dogs. And when I visited my grandfather in the nursing home, everyone was just glad to see her.
Mm-hmm.
When I started bringing her to sessions or to work with my students, I realized that they often felt very disappointed in their interaction with her.
Hmm.
She wouldn't run up and lick you like a dog. She doesn't come when called like a dog.
Right.
Um, she does things on her own terms and when she would like to. And it takes her time to build a relationship where she'll come up and sort of express a lot of her personality. And I initially was like, Bunny, why can't you just be friendly? Uh,
Right.
and I think,
Perform.
yeah, I think that's a mistake I made early on. Is like, oh gosh, what are the rabbits done doing with the client? Wants the rabbit to do is what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And then in sitting with that for a while, I realized that when the rabbit was disappointing, she was actually the most helpful
Hmm.
therapeutically.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a neutral thing for a rabbit to just be sort of hanging around but not approaching you. It's a neutral situation.
Right.
But I discovered that some of the things that folks would project onto, as far as the meaning they would project onto that, that was coming from outside of our session. That was coming from things that were going on in their relationships with other people. So, for example, a lot of folks describe feeling rejected initially by the rabbit.
Wow.
And, back to looking at the animal as a teacher instead of just an object that I use for comfort.
Hmm.
Um, what could she teach us here? Tell me about that feeling rejected. What about that carries that meaning for you?
Hmm.
And getting to,
Wow.
to unpack that, where I could have sat someone down in session and said, tell me about your relationship with rejection. And it would have been sort of awkward. And I think
Yeah.
we wouldn't have gotten that really experiential, in the moment, here and now opportunity without her.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I even think within species how much variation. I think about my dogs. Obviously, I'm a dog person very much. That overt communication works very well for me, and I have to learn how to tone it down when working with other species sometimes. But um, you think about the expectation people have when you show up with a therapy animal,
mm-hmm.
and you think about how even we have some people asking questions, which we'll get to soon, about animal assisted activities versus animal assisted therapy. But for me, I found that my kind of exuberant, always happy, silly poodle can be a really great fit sometimes for certain AAA environments, because you have that expectation and you're not expected to dive as much in to the
Sure.
relationship that we have with animals. But I love how you lead people, and especially professionals, through the realization that these animals are not just objects. They're not going to perform based on what we want, but that they can teach us so much based on how complex we interact with them.
Hey, Saki's so funny. She has different ways that she shows up for different things. So, in terms of animal assisted activities, or um, maybe going to an event where she's going to encounter um, people coming up and wanting to say hi. She's actually a fantastic visitation animal.
Hmm.
The way she shows up is somehow, and the context looks different. So
Right.
in my office, she has her own hutch, which is under a tablecloth for privacy that she can access at any
Hmm.
point. And she gets free roam of the office, and she can choose to interact or not interact in any way that she wishes. It's not structured.
Right.
But when we go to an event, she hops in her little carrier, and I bring a little pad for her to sit on.
Hmm.
And people sort of come and go, and it's almost like she recognizes that she is the thing that is the star of the show.
Hmm.
And she'll yeah, she has a great time at the events. And
That's funny.
she's got a big head for a few days after. Yeah, people will come up and she'll be like, I expect that you're here to see me.
Yes.
And I'm
Yep.
like, Saki, let me give the person a handout. And she's like, but they're here to see me.
Yes. And let's be honest, we know when we have an adorable bunny with us, they are.
Yeah, and I never would have thought a rabbit would be well suited for that. I mean, they're prey animals. They're
Mhm.
naturally sort of vigilant. But this particular rabbit just loves it.
Hmm.
She's very confident, I'd say, and calm. So it's lucky
Yeah.
that she has the right temperament to be happy doing this kind of work.
Definitely. That's so essential. I think back, and this kind of leads me to my next question. I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you have faced, and kind of your way of getting beyond those as you've navigated this field. I think even for me, that brought up the fact that for so long I wanted to have a therapy animal so badly, and I wanted to visit in certain settings so badly that I think I would probably, in retrospect, have made some different choices about who I brought with me where, and just asking my animals to be in situations that I don't know that they always wanted to be in. So that was one of my learning blocks and challenges in this role. And I'm wondering what you might be able to share with us about some of the things that you had to learn from as you advanced in your career.
Oh, sure. I'll be honest. Sometimes I look back at my early work, especially with dogs, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
ah. I wish I would have done that differently. And, it boils down to I was doing the best I knew how to do at the time.
Mhm.
It's just that the knowledge I had at the time was inaccurate. And, I'm sure I'm not alone in sort of feeling like it's gotten better over the last few
Right.
years, largely due to Pet Partners' efforts. But finding information was easy. Finding accurate information
Mm.
was hard. And for
Mhm.
someone who's just entering this and not able to really tell the difference, to assess the difference, it was really, really hard.
Mhm.
And so I definitely got some poor advice from who I thought were experts, particularly with dogs,
Right.
telling me one way was a way to do things, and then learning as I developed that no, it's not the way I want to do things.
Mhm.
And so really changing that as I learned and being willing and able to adapt. But finding accurate information is still very difficult, especially if you're new to all of this and still trying to tell the difference.
Yes.
Um, and it's gotten a lot better now. Um, Again, there's more folks doing this, and organizations like Pet Partners and some of the other therapy or anthrozoology and
Mhm.
animal organizations are doing a lot to promote this. But it was really hard for me to find a counselor that did this
Mhm.
and that did it well. So, you know, um, while I was pretty confident doing volunteer visits, especially with the rabbit, I didn't have anyone to go talk to about. So, all my clients feel rejected by the rabbit. Like,
Right.
what do I
What do
do?
I do? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had to figure a lot of that out on my own.
Mhm.
And I think, I would have been much more skilled and effective if I had a mentor or a formal mentorship relationship like that to be able to say, oh, what?
Yeah.
What?
Help. Yeah.
I know there's something here, but there's help.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
yeah, and just mistakes I've made in the relationship. Again, thinking I was doing the right thing, and then learning that there are definitely better ways to do them. I think that's been a huge challenge for me as an individual. I know, no, I'm probably not the only person who started out that way.
Mhm.
So just recognizing the importance of good quality information and having a reliable place to go to help you identify what's good information and what might not
Right.
be. And then from the perspective of the field as a practitioner of animal assisted interventions, um, when I say I work with a therapy animal, people have an assumption about that. And so the conflation of the terms, like they call it a service animal, they call it a comfort animal, they call it an emotional support animal. It's like, no, she's none of those things.
Right.
Um, so that's the first thing that even getting through the door, people have often a misconception about the animal and the animal's role.
Right.
But also, I think different expectations of what maybe they believe the animal owes them.
Mm.
So this idea of, well, it's a therapy animal, it's supposed to let me pet it.
Mhm.
And well, it's a therapy animal, so you may invite it to be petted.
Right.
But really, I think the general public's really enthusiastic about this, which is great because
Mhm.
the field's in a very different place than when I started, where people basically told me to get out.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's wonderful. But I also think because of this sort of exponential, all of a sudden sort of surge, that there's a lot of confusion about the role of the animal. And I find myself in the position of um, really having to consistently, constantly set firm boundaries about not the way my animal chooses to interact, but the way people choose to approach or interact with the animal.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
no, you can't just run up and hug it. I know you want to. I know she's adorable.
Mhm.
But that's not okay. Even on volunteer visits, that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that being an advocate for your animal, it's we are in such a great place though with that challenge, because I think even as you're saying all this about the room for not just education about animals that we can provide, but for education about relationships between people, and for the way to approach a situation, and how to respect boundaries, and how to state boundaries. There's just so much now that we're being let in the door in more places, both as professionals and as volunteer handlers, to really champion not only the difference between the different working animals, but how we as humans should be relating to all animals in
Right.
general.
Yeah.
Such an
So
opportunity.
I think again the interest is great, but I also think there's a bit of a dark side to it where in some ways some folks are viewing an animal as another commodity to be used.
Hmm.
I need to be comforted, therefore the dog needs to provide me comfort, and they need to do it in the way that I want them to.
Hmm.
And just it's not the way that I conceptualize interacting with another living thing. It's not a sand tray. It's not a
Right.
stuffed animal. So I think we have a lot of work to do in advocacy in general, in animal assisted therapy, as well as animal assisted activities and everything beyond that,
Right.
um, to think about the animal as a living sentient being that has its own bodily autonomy.
Hmm.
And while that is a gold mine to explore in counseling,
Yes.
is to talk about consent and mutuality in relationships and bodily autonomy and feeling owed. So that's a gold mine.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes it's harder to address on a consistent basis if it's outside of a mental health context, because that's not what you're there for.
Right. Right. Yep, it is a much it's a topic that requires, I think, some rapport and some trust, and of course something I've always appreciated that you have talked to me about, especially when I was getting started in my career, is that to really take it further and to do an animal assisted therapy intervention, it is so essential that you as the professional have the competencies to be a professional in your line of work before you're trying to get too involved in some of the animal assisted interventions, and so that you can do those kinds of things like have a conversation around consent in a really professional and informed way that represents best practices for your vocation.
Yeah. So in terms of challenges for the field, again that one that I've thankfully learned how to navigate a little bit more about finding good information and making sure I'm current and changing and open and willing to adapt as I find out new information. I think that's a challenge. And then professionally, some of the things that we're facing as professional issues with almost identity,
Hmm.
um, and how others relate to us and our animals based on um, a formalized identity that's recognized.
Hmm. Absolutely. Well, we are very lucky again at Pet Partners to have you and to have many other members on our Human Animal Bond Advisory Board, and to work in collaboration with so many people in the field from various institutions who we all have the same goal. We all see the incredible promise of the intervention, but as a researcher, I love to see that there's consistency, whether you're talking to a counselor, to an occupational therapist, to an AA volunteer. We're saying a lot of the same things about what we need to really be best prepared to advocate for our animals. So, before we go to we have some great questions coming in from all of our viewers. I do want to invite you to share with us just what, now that you've seen the field grow in the way it has, what is your greatest hope for the field? And it's a big question, but what would you just
Oh,
love to
I
see
have so
happen?
many. Like how long we got? Yeah, I have quite a few. Um, I think if I had to pick some that were at the top of my priority list, because there are numerous, but maybe at the top of my priority list is I would like to see more attention given to handler preparation, and not only more attention given to it, but um, that being an accepted and known thing, that
Mhm.
the most important thing in a therapy animal and handler team is the preparation of the handler.
Mhm.
Like, sure, the animals need to be comfortable That's essential, and they need to have polite manners and predictable manners.
Hmm.
Um, but I think there's this sort of idea circulating, and I can't pin where it's coming from, that it's all about, well, when can my dog be a therapy animal? It's like, well, when can you be a therapy handler? And this emphasis that it's kind of a paradox when I talk to my students. And in some sense, it's all about the animal, and at the same time, it has nothing to do with the animal.
Right.
It's the human handler. And I'd like to see more public perception, more public knowledge,
Hmm.
and even in the field, even within other counselors who are new to this, and seeing more of an emphasis on the animal advocacy piece.
Hmm.
That it's not an afterthought, and even shifting the way we conceptualize our interactions, like the amount of frustration that I had when my bunny wouldn't come up and talk to someone.
Right.
um, that's it's frustrating to me. I know that impacts my relationship with the rabbit and the quality of the work, but even just shifting that mindset to whatever is going on with the animal right now is something I need to abandon my agenda
Right.
and listen to and be open to learning from, because it turns out when I abandoned my agenda with the horses, the dogs, and the rabbits, and just trust that they know what they're doing and it's my job to figure it
Hmm.
out, that's when we have the magic.
Absolutely. Yep, that's when we move beyond the assumption of an animal as an object to an animal as a teacher, and that's when we really are empowered to not only be more impactful in what we do, but to address the very critical element of protecting animal welfare, and not just welfare, but that this isn't something they enjoy doing. That they're more than a willing participant. That they are like your bunny, who is sitting there expecting praise and
Yeah, I offer her to go
and
back to her little travel kennel at the end of the day, and she's like, "But can I just have 5 more minutes?"
but I'm not done. Yes, yes. I It is sad during this whole COVID crisis. My therapy animals, I have to just take them somewhere, maybe through a drive-through or something, because
Yeah,
they are definitely the ones who enjoy the work and are missing it. So,
yeah, I know. I know. Star is missing it. Some people call it an English Shepherd. Usually, if you're from England, you call it an English Shepherd. If you're from Scotland, Ireland, or Wales, you call it a farm collie.
okay.
Yeah, she's essentially very much like a border collie. So I've decided that at least while we're dealing with the COVID stuff, she's not going to come to work. She misses it, but even though I think she could handle it really well,
Hmm.
I don't think it's fair to have her coming in and out and being around people she doesn't know who are all wearing masks.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that's just way too much to ask for a dog.
Yep.
But after speaking with the rabbit's vet, it looks like it will be safe for everyone if the rabbit is able to kind of, she just gets free reign of the office. So yeah.
That is great. I know that there's been this weird paradox of wanting to be as careful as possible and also knowing that the world needs
Yeah.
you as a mental health practitioner and our animals more than ever. So I'm glad you mentioned the mask issue. We have done some Facebook Lives with trainers and people who can talk a little bit about how if you are preparing to go back out into the world, no matter what species you work with, it's a different world. It's mask. It's also things like, we talk about these animals who are expectant of attention, and you go out and now people are maintaining distance. I know my poodles turn around looking at me like, what is going
People are
on?
being weird. What's happening?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I know we have just a few more minutes, but I want to get to some of the questions. You have some really great comments coming in. A lot of people just thanking you for stressing the importance of being a handler who is their animal's advocate and who is prepared to navigate this kind of complex situations. Early on, we had a question that I thought was really interesting. We talked about how you have authored competencies within the counseling field. And the question was, are those the same competencies, in your opinion, for practitioners, for animal assisted therapists, as they are for animal assisted activity volunteer leaders, things like that? So, if you could talk a little bit about those competencies and how you see them applying in different arenas.
Yeah. So that is a great question. and it's one of the things that started my relationship with pet partners. So the competencies for mental health professionals was the result of an empirical study. And in that study, our participants were counselors, psychologists, and social workers.
Okay.
So those competencies are pretty directly relevant to that. But Mary Margaret had the idea that it sounded like from her, after looking at the competencies, that there were several that were universal,
Mm-hmm.
that regardless of your role working with an animal, that you needed to know. For example, to be able to read the body language of your animal.
Right.
Everyone needs to know that, from a volunteer handler all the way up to someone who's integrating this in their healthcare practice.
Mm-hmm.
So in collaboration with Mary Margaret, we did create a tiered model of these competencies. So the base level is for folks that are doing volunteer visits. The mid-level is for folks who are doing paraprofessional work with this. And then the top level is for folks doing this within their scope of practice as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is on the Pet Partners website. So hopefully
Well,
that can serve as a resource for that.
definitely. We'll get that put in the comments box too, so people can go and check that out. I know a lot of people will want to read more about that, and it can provide some really key framework for all of us who, like we've talked about, a common theme of this conversation is having the desire to share the love of animals with the world, but sometimes not knowing where to start. So if you are a handler who asked that question, then chances are you are a handler who is doing all the right things, learning about competencies and how to best go out into the field with your animal. Awesome. So, another question that came in, and something that I love to hear you talk about, but just if you have a success story or two that you could share with us about how it looks when you have an animal with you in practice. Someone noted that you can get your animal all ready and you can show up in session and sometimes not know what to do next as the activity, and not wanting to force your animal to perform. But what do you do in session? Walk us through just an interaction that's been successful for you.
Sure. Yeah. Good question. So as a counselor in general, I'm fairly non-directive, which means I very seldom show up to any session with or without an animal with a set agenda. And I have a general treatment plan that's overall, but generally I work with what is showing up in the moment within some guidelines. So it's a lot of reflexivity to what's going on in the room. And as someone who specializes in trauma, a lot of my work is relational. So looking at sort of how to ground,
Mm-hmm.
so those physiological strategies, but also how to reorient ourselves to healthy relationships with ourselves and others. And so it's very non-directive, and I think it's no surprise that my work with animals is because it is integrated into my approach, my professional approach, is also very non-directive. So very often, if a client has said that they would like to have animals present in their sessions, and I've determined that that's okay, and they've gone through the process of informed consent, sometimes the animal just they just come.
Mm-hmm.
Like Saki has free reign in my office. When Star the dog comes either to my classes or to my individual work, we just let her hang around in the room like she would. And the way they choose to interact or not interact, as long as I'm paying attention, tells us so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that perspective, I think part of my role is to serve as a translator for the animal. Or to have the animal help me pick up on things that are going on that might be helpful to be reflected to the client. So the animal typically gets free reign to interact in whatever way they want or to decline interaction altogether. And very much like my original work with horses, I view them as the teacher. So whatever they are choosing to do,
Mm-hmm.
I believe animals are in constant communication with us. And so it's my job to pay attention.
Right.
So that's 90% of the work I do with animals. Some of the more structured stuff I do, I typically need to have like a concrete reason for why that's going to be the right intervention. But for example, when I'm working on maybe some assertiveness skills or being able to communicate what you would like to someone else, I'll engage some of my clients or invite both the client and the dog to do some obedience prompts
Hmm.
to work on communication and also to work with frustration tolerance of what happens if my message doesn't go through.
Right.
How can we work on troubleshooting that in the communication relationship, and then how do we translate that? But yeah, the obedience prompts are always helpful for that. And sometimes a client will have something that a particular prompt that they would like to train the dog to do. So they'll get the empowerment of learning how to do that. Like, okay, what is it? How do we
Hmm.
determine if that's an appropriate thing to ask a dog or teach a dog to do?
Right.
And then, okay, you need to do some homework and bring it into session about how do we use positive reinforcement methods only to teach that trick. So what are some strategies? And fortunately, Star, the dog that I'm working with now, loves nothing more than a new trick.
Good. That makes her a good candidate for that kind of activity.
Yeah, oh, she loves it. And sometimes even without prompting, if you look like you're about to start obedience stuff, she'll just go through all the prompts that she knows. And sooner or later, she knows she'll hit the one that she
I
gets
love
trained
that.
for.
That is
So that
awesome.
should
She needs to come have a conversation with my Yorkie poo, who, man, she is stubborn. I
you
ask
did
to
her.
sit. She says, you sit.
So I've been accused of being stubborn a time or two in my life, and I've learned that I actually prefer the term resolute.
Resolute. Yes.
Yeah, she's
Lucy is resolute.
yeah.
Yes. 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 I love it. I love it. Well, and it again comes back to what you've done such a great job talking to us in the field about, which is so much of our ability to do this work is about becoming familiar with and becoming comfortable with being that voice for our animals and to know enough about the animal's body language, enough about their species to do that in an informed way. But then to sometimes have conversations that are a little uncomfortable. I know as someone who would go out and do some AAA visits, when my animals in the past did not do what I thought they would do, it puts me in a position to where I have to make sure I don't say the wrong thing and to make sure that I'm still communicating on behalf of my animal in a way that's going to be beneficial for everyone. I love that. If you haven't checked out our AACR training yet, specifically, Leslie really helped design a lot of that course so that you know how to say the right thing, how to avoid saying the wrong thing, especially in these really important contexts of crisis response. So.
Diplomacy is a learned skill.
Absolutely. It definitely is. It definitely is. Well, I want to be respectful of our time, so we will start to wrap up soon. But for those of you who have joined us today, I know we see a lot more questions, and I'm happy to see so much interest. You'll be excited to know that us at Pet Partners are really, really committed to stepping into this space. So many professionals who have all of the skills to be so competent within their vocations and have the desire to bring therapy animals into their work need help in learning how to do that and how to do that well. So Pet Partners is really hard at work determining how we can work with some of the other thought leaders in this field to provide some landscape and some benchmarks for you. So if you have not yet signed up for our newsletter for AAI professionals, we are going to drop that link in the comment box. Please do sign up for that so that you can stay in the loop on our developments that we make in the space when we have more opportunities to learn from people like Dr. Leslie Stewart. We want you to be a part of that conversation, and we want to continue to shape our efforts in this space based on what you need and what you see in the field. So make sure to check that out. But now, looking at the time, we have just a few minutes left. Anything you'd like to say as a goodbye, a well wish for our viewers today, Dr. Stewart?
Well, just thanks for coming. It's nice to be able to talk to folks. I know I've been missing the conference interactions a lot. So thank you for coming, and for being dedicated enough to doing this work and supporting your animal to take extra time to attend events like these. And you're so generous to have me. It's such a nice opportunity. And I think, are folks going to get my contact information in case they have any follow up questions or anything?
Yes, we can put that in the comments as well. So this recording will be available to go back and reference, and then we really appreciate you making yourself available to help people with any questions that we didn't get to today. And of course, if we see questions that have come up enough, then we can continue to get some resources out for the folks who've attended today. So.
I'm always happy to help folks who feel like they're getting started and feel a little lost. I remember what that's like, and I think, Taylor, you all also have the information about our certificate program as well, if folks were interested in checking that out.
Yes, we'll put that there. Please do check out the certificate program with Idaho State that Dr. Stewart oversees. Great place to get education. And for those of you who have you're hungry enough for this information that you are on this presentation today, please check that out. We're fortunate to have so many people on our team and in communication with who are really helping to address some of the gaps in education in the field. So you will not be disappointed by checking that out. So thank you so much for your time today, for everyone who's joined us, and just for all that you've done for this field, for me as a professional, and as a friend. I am so grateful.
Yeah, thank you. The field is definitely lucky to have you.
Thank you very much. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening, and we will be back with our next Facebook Live event, keeping the series going, talking to AAI professionals, to see what we can learn from them, what they can learn from all of our dedicated handlers. So we look forward to
You
continuing.
should definitely attend. I saw who your next speaker is. You should go. You should go.
Yes, it's going to be a good one. We have some wonderful speakers lined up. So thank you very much, everyone.